Hello friends. While writing code in TradingView Pine Script, whether it's for an indicator or a strategy, it's important to manage different versions of your code properly. TradingView has introduced a new feature to make versioning much easier, and that's what we're going to learn in this video. Here, I've created a simple indicator called Sum Indicator. It contains a few EMAs, a parabolic SAR, and some other features. But when I first started creating this indicator, I probably only wrote the indicator's name and maybe added one EMA. I definitely didn't write the entire code in a single sitting. This is just a small example, but in real projects your code could easily be 100, 200, or even 1000 lines long. You may have started writing that code 2, 4, or even 6 months ago. Now, if you click on the indicator's name, you'll see an option called Version History. Here, you can see when you first started creating the indicator, the exact time you started, how many versions have been created so far, and how many times you've modified your code. If your project is large and you've been working on it for several months, you might end up with hundreds of versions. However, not every version is important. Only some versions are stable, finalized, or represent major milestones in your development. Whenever I reach an important stage where the code becomes stable and ready to use, I make a note of that version. For example, if you look at the indicator function, I give the title as Sum Indicator. In the short title, I always append a version number. I usually start version numbering with version 1.0. So, what was in version 1.0? In version 1.0, I had simply drawn a single EMA. You can see the note here, 1 EMA drawn. I also recorded the version number where this milestone was reached. It was version 3. Now, if I open version 3 from the version history, you'll see version 1.0.3. The version number shown there is the same one I've noted here, along with the description, 1 EMA drawn. If I show you the code, you'll notice there's nothing complicated. It's only about 12 or 13 lines long. It contains the indicator function, then I created a single EMA with a length of 50, and simply plotted it on the chart. That was my version 1.0. I had completed the work up to that point and stopped. Since the code was stable, I wanted to remember this milestone in the future. If I ever needed to look back, I could quickly see where I had stopped and at which point the indicator had become stable. So, I noted that version 3 was the version where the indicator first became stable. Now let's look at the next stable milestone. At version 6, I've written the note EMA length and color inputs added. Let's open version 6 from the version history. As you can see, it says EMA length and color inputs added. What happened between version 3 and version 6? After version 3, I made a few improvements to the code and saved it, which created version 4. Then I made a few more changes and saved again, creating version 5. After another set of improvements, I saved once more, and that became version 6. Version 6 was another stable and safe milestone where I had finished an important part of the work. At this stage, I had added user inputs for the EMA length and the EMA color. Earlier, we simply created the EMA and plotted it on the chart. We hadn't assigned it a customizable color, and the EMA length was hard-coded to 50. So instead of permanently using the value 50, I thought it would be better to create a user input for the EMA length. The default value would still be 50, but users could change it whenever they wanted. Similarly, I also added a color input, allowing users to choose the color of the EMA line. Those were the improvements I made at this stage. After version 3, I kept making improvements, and eventually I reached version 6. At that point, the code had become stable and was working well, so I recorded it as another milestone. I named it version 1.1, and I also updated the version number in the indicator title accordingly. So, which entry in the version history corresponds to version 1.1? It's version 6. After that, I made a few more changes and saved the code, creating version 7. Then I made some additional changes, saved again, and that became version 8. What did I add in version 8? You can see the description, 2 more EMAs drawn. There are now 2 additional EMAs visible on the chart. This work was completed in version 8. If I open version 8 from the version history, you'll see that earlier we only had EMA 1. Now I've also added EMA 2 and EMA 3. That was version 8. For this milestone, I updated the indicator version to 1.2. So, indicator version 1.2 corresponds to version history entry number 8. I noted this down along with the description that I had added 2 more EMAs, and that the code up to this point was stable. After that, I continued making changes to the indicator. I saved it several more times, creating versions 9, 10, 11, and 12. By the time I reached version 12, I had also added the parabolic SAR to the indicator. At this stage, the indicator was once again stable, so I named it version 1.3. Which entry in the version history corresponds to version 1.3? It's version 12. I also wrote a description, parabolic SAR added. So, starting from version 1.0, I gradually moved to 1.1, 1.2, and finally 1.3. All of these represent stable milestones in the development of the indicator, and version history entry 12 corresponds to version 1.3. Now, what's the benefit of maintaining these notes? Suppose I'm building this indicator for a client. Later, the client tells me, the parabolic SAR isn't useful anymore. Please remove it. The previous version was better. I don't want this feature, just send me the earlier version. If I hadn't kept track of my version history, how would I know which version was the previous stable one? I'd have to search through every saved version manually. In this example, we only have 12 versions. But in a real project with 500 or 1000 lines of code, you could easily have hundreds of versions. Keeping track of all of them manually would be extremely difficult. Now, suppose the client specifically says, version 1.2 was perfect. I want that version back. I don't want version 1.3. In that case, I simply check my notes and see that version 1.2 corresponds to version history entry number 8. Then I open version history, select version 8, and click Restore this version. Immediately, I get back the exact code from version 1.2. I could simply send that version to the client, and the job would be done. So, this is one way to keep track of your indicator versions. However, there's a limitation. How many version records are you going to maintain manually? For a small script like this approach works fine. But imagine your script is 500 or 1000 lines long. You could end up with hundreds of versions, and manually maintaining notes for all of them wouldn't be practical. Fortunately, TradingView provides a much better solution. Let's go back to version history. Here you'll notice 2 tabs. All. Named. If I click Named right now, nothing appears because I haven't named any versions yet. If I click All, I'll see every saved version, version 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Now here's the useful feature. TradingView lets you assign a custom name to any version you want, typically your stable or important milestones. That's why there's a Named tab. For example, let's take version 3, which corresponds to indicator version 1.0. I'll open version 3. The description for this version is, 1 EMA drawn. Now, if all I see in the version history is the number 3, that number alone doesn't tell me what's inside that version. If I hadn't maintained my own notes, I'd have no idea what version 3 contained unless I opened it and read the entire code. Instead of keeping separate notes outside the editor, it's much better to give the version itself a meaningful name. For example, I'll simply copy the text, 1 EMA drawn. Now let's use that as the name for version 3. Click the three dots next to version 3. You'll see an option called Rename. Click it, and a text box will appear where you can give that version any name you want. I'll simply paste the description, woh.it.wala drawn, into the name field. After pressing enter, version 3 is now named woh.it.wala drawn. Now, if I switch to the named tab, you'll see version 3 listed there with the name woh.it.wala drawn. You can do the same for all your important versions. For example, indicator version 1.1 corresponds to version 6. I'll copy its description. Open version 6, click the three dots, choose Rename, paste the description, and press enter. Now that version also appears in the named tab. Similarly, let's do the same for indicator version 1.2, which corresponds to version 8. I'll copy its description, open version 8, click the three dots, select Rename, paste the description, and press enter. Next, let's name indicator version 1.3, which corresponds to version 12. Earlier, I had considered version 9 to be version 1.3, but later I found some issues with it. So I made more changes, creating version 10, then version 11, and finally version 12. Version 12 became the final stable version. So I'll copy its description, open version 12, click the three dots, choose Rename, paste the description, and press enter. Now all of my stable versions have meaningful names, and they'll all appear in the named tab. This makes things much easier. In the All tab, you might have hundreds of versions. For example, version 11 may not be useful anymore. Version 10 may not be useful. Version 9 may not be useful. Version 8 is an important stable version. Version 7 may not be useful either. In a real project, you'll usually have only a handful of important versions, while the rest are just intermediate saves made after small code changes. You don't want to waste time searching through all of those unnecessary versions. Instead of browsing the All tab, you can simply open the Named tab. There, you'll see only the stable versions that you've explicitly named. For example, you can see all the important milestones, versions 3, 6, 8, and 12, listed together. This is a much cleaner and faster way to manage version history. So, whether you're writing a Pine script indicator or a strategy, you can certainly keep version notes manually if you want. That's the older approach. But the newer and better method is to assign names directly to your important versions. Those named versions will always be available in the Named tab. For example, if I wanted to restore version 1.2, which corresponds to version 8, I could find it immediately by its name, or by its version number, click it, and restore it. That would instantly bring back my stable version 1.2. That's how you can use TradingView's Named Versions feature to organize and manage your Pine script projects more efficiently. Thanks for watching the video.